Welcome back to Riksha Vibhavana, the Tropical Vedic Podcast, where we take a closer look at the astrology of the week ahead. Our focus is the week of December 14th to December 20th. This week opens with a surge of inner heat and resolve. From Monday onwards, the atmosphere itself feels more charged, as if something deep in the collective psyche is waking up, gathering strength and preparing us to move with purpose. Mars, the warrior and grand catalyst of the zodiac, moves into his favorite sign, Capricorn. Until late middle January next year, there is a sharpening of will, a tightening of focus, and a growing sense that effort must now become deliberate. This is not a frantic fire, this is a strategic and intense activation of Capricorn, the taskmaster of the zodiac. As the week unfolds, that rising force encounters two very different currents. One demands maturity, accountability, and inner discipline. The other dissolves certainty, invites surrender, imagination, and spiritual sensitivity. And in the midst of these two, a new moon arrives, asking us not simply to act, but to reroute our intentions at the deepest possible level. And underlying all of this is a much larger shift, a seasonal turning, the solstice pivot, winter solstice in the northern hemisphere and summer solstice in the southern hemisphere, marking the beginning of a new quarter of the astrological year. What ignites now does not simply burn briefly, it sets the tone for the months ahead. This is a week of power, vision, and alignment, and about choosing where and how we place our fire. Before we turn to the new moon, it's essential to understand the energetic backdrop that frames the entire week. From December 15th onwards, Mars moves into Capricorn, its place of exaltation, and will remain there into the early part of the new calendar year. Phenomenologically, this marks a peak activation of Agni, the Mahabhuta of fire. But not in a raw, impulsive way. This is a fire that has learned patience, a strategic fire that knows how to endure. Exalted Mars feels like sustained effort rather than bursts of passion. Courage that shows up consistently every day. The capacity to carry weight without collapse. And above all, the will to build something that endures. This is the fire of the determined mountain climber, and not a wild fire burning uncontrollably. What makes this particularly significant is that Mars now stands opposite Jupiter, exalted in Cancer. This is a rare and powerful axis. Will and wisdom meet, effort and care blend into one, discipline and meaning converge. The Vedic sages equated Mars with Kartikeya, the god of war, and Jupiter with Ganesha, the god of wisdom that opens our way and removes obstacles. Jupiter in Cancer holds the vision, emotional intelligence, ethical orientation, and the deeper why. Mars in Capricorn supplies the raw energy to manifest that vision in form. Together they create the possibility of constructive power, action guided by consciousness, ambition softened by compassion. This dynamic will build up force as it culminates middle January 2026. Therefore, knowing which astrological houses in your birth chart are dominated by Cancer and Capricorn will serve you well to make the most of this powerful synergy. Now we come to the deepest layer of the week, the new moon on December 19th, forming in the final degrees of Sagittarius, very close to Mūla Nakṣatra, a lunar mansion whose signature is as radical as it is ancient. Mūla means root. Unlike many nakshatras, Mūla does not simply point to a visible star cluster. Astronomically, this region of Sagittarius aligns closely with what modern astronomers identify as the galactic center, the rotational heart of the Milky Way, dominated by a supermassive gravitational singularity known as Sagittarius A. The galactic center is a region of immense gravitational pull, extreme density, energetic emission, and total invisibility at the optical level. It cannot be seen directly. Its presence is inferred through its effects, through motion, radiation, and distortion. Now, we have to pause here. In Vedic astrology, the deity of Mūla is associated with Niriti, a goddess synonymous with dissolution, decay, loss, chaos, and the breaking apart of structures. She rules what is pulled back into the root, what is undone so that truth can be revealed at its core. This is quite astonishing. Thousands of years ago, long before telescopes or radio astronomy, this region of the heavens was mystically understood as a place of annihilation and return, where forms are stripped away, where certainty collapses, and where foundations are exposed. Modern science tells us that the galactic center behaves in much the same way. Matter is drawn in, structures are destabilized, time and space themselves are warped. Niriti is not evil, she is necessary. She represents the force that dismantles what has become false, inflated, or misaligned, not to punish but to restore authenticity. When a new moon occurs here, the invitation is profound, not to build yet, but to examine the root. This moment in time asks us to consider which ambitions are real and which are inherited illusions. What must be allowed to fall apart so something truer can emerge? This is not a comfortable energy, but it is exceedingly honest. Because this is a new moon, whatever we plant now carries forward through the coming lunar month, but it is not a month of superficial intention setting. This is a cycle for radical honesty, clearing false narratives, aligning action with deeper truth, and choosing what is worth building before we start building. With exalted Mars providing sustained energy, exalted Jupiter providing moral and emotional guidance, and Mūla demanding root-level clarity, this lunation sets the stage for meaningful long-term movement. And as we approach the solstices, the ancient turning of the Vedic year, we are reminded that this is not just personal work, it is part of the larger cosmic picture. We are standing at the root of something far bigger. Additionally, running through the heart of this week is a powerful sequence involving the sun, our axis of meaning, vitality, and conscious orientation. As the sun moves through late Sagittarius, it forms two significant squares, first to Saturn and then to Neptune. Together, these aspects describe a very precise inner process, one that tests vision, dissolves illusion, and asks for mature alignment. The Sun-Saturn square, active from around the 14th of December and peaking on the 16th, brings us face to face with limits. Saturn represents time, consequence, responsibility, and inner authority. When the Sagittarian sun, filled with vision, faith, and aspiration, meets Saturn at a right angle, we feel the friction between what we want to believe and what we are actually able to sustain. This can come across as pressure, as delay or heaviness. Enthusiasm may be checked, confidence may waver, we may feel the weight of obligation or the sense that something we hoped would move quickly now requires patience and effort. But this aspect is not here to extinguish fire. It is here to temper it. Saturn refines the sun. It forces honesty. It asks whether our ideals are strong enough to take form and whether our sense of purpose is rooted in reality rather than fantasy. This is a moment of sober self-assessment. What are we truly committed to? Where do we need to grow up? simplify, or take responsibility. Saturn does not say no, it says not yet, or only if you are willing to do the work. As the week progresses, the tone shifts. From around the 18th onwards, the Sun moves into a square with Neptune, peaking very close to the new moon. Here Saturn hardens and clarifies. Neptune softens and dissolves. Certainty gives way to ambiguity. Clear edges blur. The sense of direction may feel less defined and even elusive, but more intuitively strong. Under a Sun-Neptune square, the ego loosens. We become more sensitive, more permeable to subtle impressions. Imagination, compassion, and spiritual sensitivity increase, but so can confusion, projection, and idealization. It may be harder to tell where inspiration ends and illusion begins. This is not a time for forcing answers or demanding clarity. It is a time for listening beneath the surface. Taken together, these two squares form a sequence of initiation. First, Saturn strips away what is unrealistic, inflated, and ungrounded. Then Neptune asks us to surrender what remains, to trust something deeper than control and certainty. The Sun is being reshaped from two sides, disciplined by Saturn and softened by Neptune. This is why the new moon that follows is so significant. We are not meant to emerge from this week with rigid conclusions. We are meant to emerge with refined intention, vision that has survived testing, and faith that does not depend on superficial certainty. If anything, this week teaches us that clarity is not always sharp. Sometimes clarity comes through humility, patience, and the willingness to stand in the unknown long enough for truth to reveal itself. Thank you so much for tuning in with me. I have been your host, Kavi. To stay connected, you can find me on Instagram at Eye of the Vedas. If you feel called to explore your own chart in more depth, I offer personalized readings and one-on-one study through my page. Wishing you a grounded, insightful, and deeply aligned week ahead.